Chapter 3, First Phase of the Indian National Movement. 1. Which are the major phases in Indian National Congress? 1. 1. The phase of early nationalist or moderates, 1885 to 1907. 2. The phase assertive nationalist or radicals, 1907 to 1916 and 3. The Gandhian era, 1915 to 1947. 2. Which period of the national movement is known as the period of the early nationalists? 1. The period of the national movement from the year 1885 to 1907 is known as the period of the early nationalists. 3. Name any 4 leaders of the Congress who are known as early nationalists. 2. Leaders: W.C. Banerjee, Dadabhai Naoroji, P.R. Naidu, Justice Ranade, A.O. Hume. Beliefs of the early nationalist. 4. Mention any 2 beliefs of the early nationalists. 2. Or mention 2 reasons for the early nationalists' faith in the British sense of justice. 2. Or what was the belief of the early nationalists regarding the British rule in India? 2. Or what was the attitude of the early nationalists towards the British? 2. 1. The early nationalists had faith in the sense of justice, fair play, honesty, and integrity of the British. 2. They were of the opinion that British would help Indians govern themselves according to Western standards. 5. What according to the early nationalists was an obstacle in India's progress? 1. According to the early nationalists, the main obstacle in India's progress was social and economic backwardness of Indians and not the British colonial rule. 6. What kind of self-government did the early nationalists demand? 1. The early nationalists demanded self-government or Swaraj within the British Empire like the self-governing colonies of Canada and Australia. Demands of the early nationalists. 7. Mention 4 demands of the early nationalists. Or 4. What were the demands of the early nationalists? Or 4. 4 demands of the early nationalists are dash. 8. Mention 1 defense of civil rights demand of the early nationalists. Or 1. What did the early nationalists oppose in the field of civil liberties? Or 1. Defense of civil rights, abolition of the Preventive Detention Act and restoration of the individual liberties. 9. Mention 1 administrative demand of the early nationalists. 1. 2. Administrative demands, repeal of the Arms Act and License Act. Spread of primary education among the masses. 10. Mention 1 economic reform demand of the early nationalists. Or 1. Mention any 1 demand of the early nationalists that aimed improving the lot of peasants. 1. 3. Economic reforms, reduction in land revenue and protection of peasants against unjust demands of the zamindars. 11. Mention 1 constitutional reform demand made by the early nationalists. 1. 4. Constitutional reforms, abolition of Indian Council,